Hey guys, it's Kat and I am back today for my 1 week 1 palette video on the Aina palette. That's the back of it. Aina palette from Anastasia Beverly Hills. In my last 1 week 1 palette, I did put up a poll and I asked if you guys wanted to see the Aina review first or the Kali Bible palette review first. And I think around 70% of people said they wanted to see this one. So I'm going with that. I do apologize to the people that want to see the Kali Bible one because I do understand that there are less reviews of that one out there, but you know, I did a poll and I have to follow it. In February, I do want to dedicate a good chunk of time to reviewing some Nabla products that I was sent, and I want to give do a video at the end of the month, recapping my favorite products from the range and what I thought about the products in the range. So it will take me some time to get to the Kali Bible one, but I will eventually get there. All right, so if you're not familiar with this series, essentially what I do is I take a palette that I've never used before. So in this case, the Aina palette, which looks like this. I put it on my eyes for the first time, which I'm gonna do today. I let you know my first impressions as I'm using it. And then I'll check back in throughout the week and let you know what looks I've created, what I think of each shade as I go through and use them all. And then when I've done enough looks to really conclude what I think about the palette, I will stop and I will conclude the palette. So I feel like even though these videos can be quite long, I do feel like they're the most accurate way to review things in sort of my experience, because I don't have to look back and try to remember things. I show you sort of as it happens. So yeah, that's what I'm going to do. So I'm going to talk about this palette first, do some swatches, then we'll get on to creating some looks. All right, so the Aina palette came out late last year. I think it might have been around October-ish, and it's a collaboration with Aina. So this is the box. It's got this sort of like cool holographic, almost light champagne gold, sort of like a, I don't know, crocodile snake skin texture on the box. And that sort of has carried over a little bit to the actual packaging. I like that it's not felt packaging like a lot of their past palettes. This is a limited edition palette and it has been around for quite a few months now. So if you do want to get it, I picked this up on sale around Christmas, and I have heard people say that they're starting to notice that it's disappearing from stores. So if you did want this, I would recommend getting it soonish. You'll probably be able to find it on sale, but it is a limited edition palette. You really can't see that cool color shift on the camera as much as you can in person. So it looks a little bit dull on camera, but in person it does sort of shift to like green to purple to pink, which is quite nice. This contains 14 eyeshadows and they're 0.7 grams each. So it's a standard Anastasia Beverly Hills format. So you do have the double-ended brush down the bottom, you have the mirror in the lid, and you've got the 14 shades. So this is a mix between, of course, shimmers and mattes like they usually do. It looks like there's 5 mattes and the rest are shimmers. This one, which is pinker, which is a dark sort of pink shade, it looks like it's a matte with a slight shimmer in it. So often those still appear on the eye quite matte, but often they put a bit of shimmer texture in it to help it blend. So I'm not sure if that's technically considered a matte. If it is, there's 6, which means there's 8 shimmers. So there are some variation in the shimmers as well. For example, Zam is a very, very, very sparkly, like almost pressed, it's not pressed glitter, but it's almost that sort of really reflective finish, which is really beautiful. We've got a duochrome over here, which is like a blue-brown pigment sort of vibe. That one's called Sponsored. I also really like that there's sort of a couple of color stories going on. So you have like a rose gold and like a gold here, so they can be sort of highlight shades, but then you have some that are sort of purpley, pinky, cool toned, and then you have some more cool toned and warm toned browns in here as well. So you can create some distinct color stories, but I also feel like they can go together pretty well. We'll see if that's the case. But yeah, on the face of it, I really like the color story. I do like that this is designed for deeper skin tones. So you'll notice that the highlight shades aren't really stark white. There's no sort of like light cream shades. There's no light caramel transition shades. Most of them are quite punchy. This shade looks quite white, but it is sort of, it looks like it's an iridescent gold sort of shade. We'll find out when we're swatching. So this would really pop on all skin tones. So it's not necessarily a frosty white, if you know what I mean. So I really like the color story here. The reason I didn't buy this straight away is because A, I have too many palettes, but B, I do feel like you can get a lot of these shades from other Anastasia Beverly Hills palettes, but looking at it in person, it's a really nicely curated palette. All right, so I'm swatching on my bare arm with no primer. These are the first 3 shades. So I'll do the top row on one arm and then I'll wipe it off and do the second row. These are quite soft to pick up. They did have a little bit of kick up in the pan, so it's typical of Anastasia Beverly Hills, but we've got the first shade here, which is a really nice sort of gold champagne with a bit of a rosy base, which is really pretty. We have a matte bright sort of pink. This is a dark berry shade that has a bit of sparkle in it, so it looks like it'd perform like a matte, but it does have a little bit of shimmer in it, whether that's to improve the blendability or I don't know, but I feel like it will perform on the skin similar to a matte. Got a matte purple. These generally are quite hard to formulate, so I'm surprised that this one is as pigmented as it is. A little bit patchy, but it looks like it's nicely blendable. We've got a nice sort of yellow toned gold here, so quite different from this one. This is like a pinky gold. This is more of a greeny yellow gold. And we have a dark chocolate matte brown. I'll just pick up a tiny bit. I've been careful not to gouge in the pan because they are very, very soft. All right, last shade is a shimmery brown. I love this color. It's like a really cool toned, it's like a chocolate brown, but it's got some like cool toned pinky silvery elements to it. It's really pretty. So that's the top row. All right, next row. This shade here is gorgeous, but it's very soft in the pan. I'll have to show you how it picked up because it's very loose, same as the purple. So this one is gorgeous. It's like a foiled gold, amazing shade, but you have to be very gentle with it. So I'll show you the pan soon. This is a nice, beautiful metallic red. I love the tone of that. It's not too pink. It's kind of red with a bit of copper in it, I guess. And this shimmery purple is really nice as well. You can see how sort of chunky that was to pick up though, and I was very gentle with picking it up. So these are kind of fragile shades. All right, next 3 shades, we'll see what that iridescent white's like. Yeah, so it's sort of, it doesn't look too frosty. It gives a sort of green gold sort of shift to it. So it's almost got a clear base with a shift. We've got a matte, I'll pick up a little bit. This is a little bit firmer pressed. A matte sort of terracotta shade, and we have that duochrome blue-brown sort of blue-green pigment type thing. These aren't the most uncommon duochromes. You see them a lot in pigment forms, but it is a nice addition to this sort of shade range. All right, last shade is just a matte sort of caramel shade, so it's a little bit more traditional caramel brown compared to this last one. This is quite firm in the pan. It's sort of hard to pick up, so it's not picking up the best. Hopefully it picks up better with the brush, but you can see there's some really interesting textures and colors here. The first 2 I'm most sort of interested in. They're really, really pretty. All right, so that's after swatching. Hopefully you can see that some of these shades, like some of these mattes, picked up really easily and there's a lot of kick up in the pan. Other ones almost sealed up. Like, can you see how that's got almost like a dark patch to it? These were pressed really firmly and they were hard to pick up. And then you can see this shade here, hopefully you can see it's super chunky. And there's a lot of like loose product in the pan. Same, this one's not as chunky, but it was very loosely pressed. So you need to be very careful with these. All right, time to apply the eyeshadows. And to be fair, I'm most inspired by this sort of corner because I really am loving browns at the moment. I really also love the idea of this one, but I don't like doing sort of just brown shades to start with. So I might do the duochrome, mix in some browns and some purples, and we'll see how we go. So I'll try to make a bit of a mix of this side and this side. And the primer I like to use at the moment is my NARS Tinted Smudge Proof eyeshadow base. The shade I like the most is medium. Someone was complaining on my last one, your light skin, why not use light? Hey, watch this. The medium one is actually the best one for my skin tone. I have the light one and it is too light. I actually like a base that matches my skin tone. Especially when you blend this baby out, it becomes perfect match for me. All right, I'm gonna go in with a little bit of ginger, and with a brush, this actually does pick up really well to the point where there's a lot of kick up in the pan. So it was quite firm when I was swatching with my finger, but it's no problem picking it up with a brush. I am a little bit concerned. I'm just tapping off quite a lot because I mainly want to use this to set my base. There's no sort of like light shade to help set my base. So I just like to do a little bit of something in the crease to prevent the darker shades sort of skipping and sticking and not looking even. So we're just using that very, very lightly. All right, so that did blend out fairly well. It's not super even and it looks a little bit patchy, but directly on a base, this is not too bad. And it's mainly patchy because it's a very pigmented shade and I'm trying to use it quite lightly. So I don't begrudge it. This is just sort of like the base for me. So I'm just setting up the look. All right, I'm going in with the shade Sponsored, just sort of like all over the lid. You can see that this is a beautiful shade. It doesn't need any, you know, sticky primer or any glitter glue or anything to apply. I'm just using a flat brush and it applies really, really nicely and gives a really beautiful effect. So once again, it's got a sort of like a brown base and this sort of greeny shift to it, which is really pretty. I'm applying a small amount at a time just because I am concerned of fallout with these palettes, like this formula. But yeah, this doesn't need to be packed on too much or built up, so that's really fantastic. All right, before I put some purple on, I want to go in with this sort of goldy green shade just on a small brush because I don't want there to be too much darkness on the inner part of my lower lash line. So I'm just running that. I haven't put any primer down here. I thought this shade might work well with the sort of greeny iridescence that blue-brown pigment sort of gives. Again, this is a pretty delicate shade. It's quite crumbly and you got to be careful picking it up in the pan because it does kick up a lot of product. All right, I want to start injecting some color. So I've got the shade Pinker just on that same brush. It's just an Eco Tools brush. I've just wiped it off a bit and I want to use this sort of as a transition color. Now this, I think depending on what you pair this with, it can look like a dark pink or it can look like a sort of mauvey purple. I don't know if it gives a shimmer on the eye. This is that sort of matte with a bit of sparkle in it. It sort of looks just like a matte, but I'm also pairing it right next to a shimmer, so it's hard to really tell. So once again, that one was very pigmented. I picked up a tiny bit and tapped it off and there was a lot of color there to blend out. So very soft eyeshadow, but very, very pigmented. So you got to be careful with how much you pick up. But you can almost see that I've just picked some random colors that don't really look like they will go together too well, but they do. They just, I think because they're the similar sort of tones and depths, they sort of just work pretty well together. On the same brush, I've got some of that darker purple. So this is, I think it's Big Wig. Yeah, Big Wig, which is just more of a more blue tone purple. You can see it's just darker and more intense. And I'm just going to take that a little bit on the top lash line as well, just in the outer corner. Just a really small amount so we're not dealing with too much fallout. Again, this was a shade that was quite firm in the pan, but with a brush, it really agitates the product, picks it up really easily. And you can also see that once again, I've mixed it with a green-brown shade, but they just sort of work really nicely together. So it's a really nice sort of color palette that they've got going on. All right, I'm just going back with a tiny bit more of that gold that I've put on the inner corner just because I feel like I've lost it a little bit, just to sort of brighten the lower lash line a little tiny bit. Then I'm just going to blend the edges with that original brush that had that sort of caramel brown on it. All right, so that's the eyeshadow. I think I'm just going to leave it at that. I think it's enough sort of color, it's enough dimension, but just as a recap, I sort of put that in the crease, that all over the lid. Then I went in and put this gold on the inner corner. I went in and put that purple and then that purple, and that's the whole look. So I did use quite a few shades, but I also feel like I've picked some sort of random ones. Like they, you know, I think most people would look at this and go, okay, pinks and purples go together, browns go together, but I've sort of jumped all over the place and it works really well. So I'm just going to do some liner, mascara, some half lashes, and I'll come back and show you the look. All right, so I'm back and all I've put on is my gel liner. This is from my Project Pan. It's a MAC one in Past Twilight, so that's the fluid line. I use the It Cosmetics Superhero Mascara, which is also in my Project Pan. And then I put half lashes on. So the Model Rock W376s. I cut them in half and I use them as half lashes. So that's what I've put on. But I think this look has come together really nicely. I think the colors work really beautifully together. I also really like that there's different textures going on. So yeah, everything I applied, I liked. I like how the colors work together so far. And you definitely gives me confidence in being able to use these sort of browns with the pinks and the purples and the red with no problem. I feel like this palette is really well curated. The only issue that I have on first impressions, and this is an issue that I have with a lot of Anastasia Beverly Hills eyeshadows, is they perform very nicely on the eye, but they are very, very fragile. So that one is very fragile. Even just picking up this sort of matte brown or the purple, it kicks up a lot of product. It's a very soft formula, and it feels like, even though when you swatch the mattes, they feel quite firmly pressed, when you go to put your brush in, it kicks up a lot of product, and you run the risk of having a lot of either wasted product in the pan, but also it sort of having a lot of fallout on your face. Now, I'm very familiar with Anastasia Beverly Hills formula. I've got pretty much all their palettes. So yeah, I just know to make sure you tap off your brush. There is enough pigment there that it will give you the effect you want. You just don't want it to be overloaded, because then it will rain down your face. So yeah, I really like how they performed, but yeah, just got to be careful with how fragile they are. But so far, I'm digging it. All right, we're back with look number 2. This lighting's going to be really harsh and horrible. It's a really, really hot day. So I've got one blind closed, one is open, and the sun is just like blaring in. So I don't even know if you can see my makeup properly, but it is what it is. So I decided today to go more of a warm sort of shimmery look. I wanted to do something a little bit more basic because I'm pairing it with a red lip and I'm going out and I didn't want to do too much color. So what I did was I actually set my base with another cream eyeshadow, so I didn't have to worry about that sort of setting the base with a dark color. I did go in with this shade again just to put in the crease. And then I put this shimmery shade all over the lid. I do think if you want that sort of effect that you get in the swatch, you'll need to apply it with your finger or with like a glitter glue, or foiled with some water or some setting spray. I just used a normal brush over the same primer as yesterday, and you'll be able to see it when you zoom in, but it's sort of twinkly, but I didn't pack it on, if that makes sense, because it is kind of chunky. I wanted it to be sort of like a thinner layer. I didn't want it to be like a chunky glitter. So I put a bit of that on. Then I went in with this brown here, which is more of a red tone. So that's what you can see on the lower lash line, and in the outer corner is this shade here. So it just gives a more red orange tone than this one here. So yeah, I was surprised at how orange it actually looks on the eyes. I thought it was going to look a little bit more brown, but it's quite orange. And then I used this shade here on the inner corner. So I'll zoom in so you can hopefully see the makeup in this lighting. I don't know. All right, so hopefully you can see it's nothing revolutionary, just some shimmery sort of goldy shade on the lid. I've got that sort of smoother shimmer shade, which is a bit lighter on the inner corner. I've got that warm sort of brown, and I've got the warm brown on the top as well. And you can just sort of see, I also blended that warm reddy brown into the crease. All right, I don't know if this is going to show the makeup better at all, but you can kind of see, I don't know. I think it looks a little bit more accurate than the video before, but yeah, that's the sort of warm, nudie, sparkly. Can you see the sparkle? What can you do with the lighting? It's horrible. All right, so I'm back with look number 3, and I decided to play with some colors today, and these aren't my colors, and that's fine with it. I'm cool with it, but this just sort of reinforces why I don't like pinks and bright pinks. So today I decided to delve into sort of these colors here, because I sort of wanted to create sort of like a soft but colorful look, and it, you know, I don't think that looks bad by any means. It just doesn't suit me, and I feel it doesn't feel like me. So that's fine, but they performed pretty well. So initially I set my crease with just a matte cream. I went in with this pink shade in the crease and on like 3/4 of the lid. And then I went into this shade just in the outer corner just to deepen it. So just to add a little bit more depth. Then I took this shade that I also used yesterday, but I put that on the inner part, so the inner third, and on the lower lash line. Then I thought, look, this is not really turning out into a look that I really enjoy, so let's just throw in another color. And I used some of the red on the lower lash line on the outer corner. So sort of like, yeah, 2/3. Lower lash line. So yeah, I went this one, and the red. I do want to use the red in a different way, but I just find that when I have reds in palettes, I often just use them in one look, and often really subtly like I've done today, and then I don't really delve into it again. So it's a color that I do want to use in a multitude of different ways, and I just thought I'll throw it in today. All right, so again, you can see that the pink is the main color here with that sort of champagne shimmer shade on the inner corner, and that sort of transitioned out to the red. So it's mainly matte along here and then shimmer sort of in the inner third and on the lower lash line. All shades applied really nicely. I put a purple liner with it and a sort of purpley red pencil liner on my waterline. It's just not a look that I really enjoy, but they performed fine. So there's no problem with the formula, no problem with any of the shades, just not a color story that I really vibe with. All right, I'm back with look number 4, and this is more of a nude look, or as nude as I can sort of go with this palette. I am starting to hit a wall with this palette and I'm struggling a little bit, which I'm kind of surprised about because I really do like Anastasia Beverly Hills formula, and I sort of thought this color story, I do like mid-tone browns and I use them very frequently. So I thought this is going to be something that I really vibe with. But I'm just noticing that the options that I sort of have from this palette are sort of chunky, sparkly shades, which I don't really like. I don't like sort of frosty, chunky, sparkly shades. You know, if I put it on with a glitter glue like this shade, which I might have to do in an upcoming look, I can really appreciate the effect, but on a daily basis, I don't like chunky, sparkly things or chunky sort of frosty things. Then there's a lot of pinks, which I don't really like either. Not a big fan of shimmery purples. And then when it comes to the browns, I really do like browns, but these they apply very, very dark on me. So I am sort of finding this a little bit of a struggle to use on a daily basis. I think for a going out look, this is stunning, but the color story for me, it's not one I'd reach for just to, you know, chuck on some makeup and, you know, go see friends or something. It just doesn't really work for me. So I am finding some limitations with it. But I also wanted to mention that the last look I did, which was a pink look, that pink shade stained my eyelids. So I took the shadow off at night. My eyelids were stained pink until the next day. Not a huge deal, but it is a little bit annoying. And if you don't want to wear makeup every day to cover it, that pink will stain your eyes. So today I was thinking of mainly doing a matte look. I thought I'd use some of these mattes in this corner and just see what kind of browny, smoky sort of look I can create. And then I hit a bit of a snag. So the issue that I had was with the shade Ginger, which is this one here. I put that all over my primer and I noticed that it's one of those matte eyeshadows, which I know Anastasia Beverly Hills have these formulas in their past palettes. Like, I don't think they intended to make it like this, but some shades just do this. The more you put on, the sort of darker it looks. So if you pack on a shade, it ends up looking quite patchy because when it grips to a lot of the color, or if you build up a lot of the matte in one area, instead of it building to just a solid kind of color, it grips differently, and the more you put on, the darker the shade gets. So this ended up looking very patchy on me, and it also ended up looking like I'd been punched in the face. It was very, very dark and just a bit funny. So I ended up having to go with a light shade to do more of a halo eye. So I wanted to reach for this shade here, which is an iridescent white that shifts gold. On the color that I put it on, it looks gold. And then all I did was I took some of the dark chocolate brown, put it on the outer corner, top and bottom, just to shape the eye a little bit. So that's all I've done, 3 shades. It wasn't a hard look, but I did have to use the shimmer to hide patchiness, if that makes sense. All right, so this is a look close up. You can see that sort of outer corner matte color looks very, very orange on me. So it's a very orangey brown. I don't know if you can see the patchiness of where it grips to some areas and it looks darker compared to others. I'm not sure if you can really see that, but you can definitely see where I sort of put a bit of, I put a couple of layers of that iridescent white to give it that gold effect, just to sort of cover the patchiness. And then I'm not sure if you can see, but on the outer corner, I put some of that dark brown, and the lower lash line, I put some of the dark brown as well, just to sort of shape the eye a little bit. So yeah, that's a look. I think it does look a lot more effective and nice in person than it does on camera, but yeah, that's it. Oh, I look so dark and moody on camera. This makeup makes me look really, really pale. Oh well, it is what it is. So we're back with look number 5, and I'm sure you can tell I wanted to emphasize the red. So I really wanted to play up this shade here because I'd previously used it just a small amount, and I don't think that's really doing this color justice, and it is a really beautiful color. It applied really nicely. Oh, I've got to get another eyeshadow. Hang on a sec. So it didn't take much to build up to get the intensity, which was really nice. So there was no fallout. It was just an easy eyeshadow to apply. I did want to also pair it with this brown here, which is, I think, one of the only shades besides this purple that I hadn't actually used. Now I did put a little bit on my outer corner and I put it on my lower lash line predominantly. I was quite surprised at how grey that looks. So you can see when I zoom in how grey it actually is. And yeah, it kind of looks really cool toned in the pan, but I thought that might just be the shift and maybe the base color is a little bit more, you can see the base color is a lot more warm toned, but on the eye it does look quite silvery, which is quite different and unique. The issue that I had with that was I found that when I wanted to blend out the look with a matte, there was only warm tones or colored. So to really keep the cool tone effect of this, which I did quite like, I couldn't use this one or that one because it was going to make it too orange. I didn't want to blow out the red to be an orange, so I ended up reaching for a different eyeshadow. This is an Illamasqua one in the shade Justify. So it is more of, you can see it's like a cool toned grayish almost transition color, which I thought suited, it's hard to see. I don't know if you can see it properly, but I thought it suited the sort of blending out the gray a little bit more and to keep those gray tones instead of turning them into orange tones. So that's what I paired with this one. So I sort of used on the lower lash line and just, so you can see it in the crease, that grey colour up into the crease. That is not from this palette. It's that shade there because I just wanted to emphasize that cool toned effect. And then I went in with a little bit of this dark brown just on the outer corners, just to once again sort of intensify the corners. And then I was like, this looks quite dark. And in hindsight, look, there's nothing really I could have paired it with. I really wanted to put like a cool toned shimmer on the inner corner. So if I had more of a silvery toned highlight shade, I would have used that, but there's not one in this palette. This is white, but it looks gold, as we saw yesterday. That is more of a light sort of light gold, rose gold. That's a sparkle. So I ended up using this yellow for some reason, just because I hadn't used it much, and I'd popped that on the inner corner. It was quite chunky, and I'll show you in the pan. It like digs in. It's not a smooth formula. It's just like a chunky formula, and I sort of struggled with that a little bit. That was the worst shade that I applied today. I do like the effect that it gave a little bit of brightness in the inner corner, which I did need for this sort of dark look, but I would have preferred to reach for something else because I didn't like the effect of that. All right, so hopefully you can see that that red is a beautiful color. Like I said, there was no issues with fallout or applying it. It didn't need a sticky base. It applied really nicely. I did do a sort of couple of light layers to build it up instead of packing a lot on at once, but it applied really beautifully. Hopefully you can see that cool tone brown shimmer that's down here. So that created a really interesting sort of shadow effect that I wasn't expecting, because I did expect it to be a bit more warmer, but it became quite cool, which I ended up liking the effect of, so that's cool. I might try to do another look with this as a predominant color because I think it is quite interesting and I haven't sort of played with it enough to give my real thoughts on what I think of this particular color. But I do think it's quite an unusual shade and I really do like it, so I want to play with that a little bit more. Then I've got that pop of color. Once again, it was a bit of a hassle to get on. It did require like a bit of blending, and then I had to go over it with the red again because it was just sort of too chunky and taking over the look. So, but that's the color I ended up using. And I do want to show you close up what I mean by it being quite chunky. So you can see that it sort of digs holes in, and there's a lot of like just chunks that it picks up. So it's not the best formula, and I probably wouldn't reach for this shade very often. Like these mattes and these shimmers work really beautifully, but these sort of chunkier ones I don't love. They're not, the formula is just not smooth and easy to use, and it's sort of delicate and a little bit of frustrating. So yeah, I didn't love that. But this look, okay, it's not something I would do on a daily basis, but it is a quite interesting and striking look. And you can see that the colors, even if you go red and sort of like a gray tone and then put a pop of weird gold, The colors do all work really nicely together, which I like, and that's probably the biggest plus of this palette in my opinion. All right, I'm back with look number 6, and I have decided I do want to do another look tomorrow with more browns, a sort of a dramatic brown look, if that makes sense. But today I wanted to use the purples, and I sort of, what I envisioned was purple all over the lid, mainly this shade because that's the one I hadn't used, and then have that in the outer corner, and then I wanted to put a pop of this very, very sparkly sort of rose gold color in the inner corner. So what I ended up doing was putting normal primer on my lid, putting a little bit of glitter glue in this inner corner, because I do know that when you put this over normal primer, it doesn't look as intense as it does in the pan. So I thought, bit of glitter glue, it'll stick, it'll look really intense. So I put that in at the start, so I just popped that in there, and then I put purple all over the lid, and it looked too much. So what I ended up doing was keeping the purple on the majority of the lid, but going back in with that sparkly shade, patting it over as like a transition. So you can see a really intense gold on the inner corner, and then it sort of fades to more of a topper over the purple, just to sort of brighten that area. And then I popped some of the matte in the outer corner, which is a really beautiful color. So this big wig shade, I love this shade of purple. I think it goes well with the warm shades. I think it goes well with the cool shades. I think it's a really nice tone of purple. And then what I did to blend out the look and just add a little bit more warmth to it was I used this shade here just lightly sort of in the crease. So yeah, that in the crease, that on the outer corner, that sort of majority of the lid, inner corner intense with glitter glue, and then patted over the purple just to sort of brighten the look a little bit. So hopefully you can see the color there. So I've got that shimmery purple all over the lid. I've got that intense matte purple on the outer corner, blended out with a warm color, as you can see. I've got the intense shimmer on the glitter glue, and then I've got it patted over the purple just to sort of brighten the purple, because yeah, the purple was sort of too dominating and dark, and it almost looked like I was punched in the face. So I did want to add a brighter element to it. So I think this is a really pretty look. I think it suits brown eyes really nicely. I think in person this looks a lot more purple, whereas on camera I think you're picking up a lot more of the gold. But yeah, trust me, it is quite a heavy purple look. It just, I don't know, just not translating as well on camera, but in person it's very, very purple. All right, time for look number 7 for my Jackie palette review, and this is going to be the last look, so I will conclude what I think about this palette right after I show you what I've used on my eyes today. So I've gone a more smoky brown look. I didn't actually intend for this to be as dark as it turned out. This is a lot more vampy than I was expecting. I did really want to use this corner color as sort of the lid color, because I thought it was sort of unique shade where it is a dark brown, but it's got almost like a silver cool tone shift to it, which I thought was really pretty. So I put that on the lid. You can see it all over the lid. Then I really wanted to, ideally I would have liked to have blended this out with a cool tone shade, but again, the only cool tone sort of matte shades are sort of the purples, which I didn't want to delve into. So I had to go the warm tone browns, which I was a bit disappointed in, because I do find it a little bit frustrating when you are limited with, you know, cool color on the lid, and then you have to warm it, like blend it out with a warm color. That's sort of something that sort of frustrates me a little bit. So I really would have loved to have seen one of those shades, a cooler tone, like a gray brown. So you can sort of play up the cool tones more in these shades, and then you have like a warm shade if you want to play up the warm tones. Anyway, so I originally blended out with this color here, but that was just to more blend it out. It's a lighter sort of matte color that isn't a pink, but then I went in with more this reddy color, and that's why you can see that around the look it looks quite red toned. You'll see it when I zoom in a little bit more. So I had that on the lower lash line. I brought it pretty far in, and then I sort of brought it into the crease so it looks a little bit more red toned. I also put a little bit of the brown sort of in the corner and the lower lash line, just to sort of intensify the color a little bit more. So I pretty much used those and that one. I was thinking of using this shade as an inner corner color, but this shade, it's pretty and it adds like a sparkle to a look, but you can either apply it as a topper sparkle or, like I did yesterday, an intense sort of inner corner sparkle. But I decided I didn't actually want to add sparkle to this look, and you can't avoid that with that shade. So I used this more champagne rose goldy sort of shade on the inner corner, and I sort of diffused it out a bit just to add a lot of brightness, rather than adding a color, if that makes sense. So I just wanted to use that more to brighten the look. So that's what I've done. All right, so here's the look. You can see the cool tone brown on the lid. You can see the warm shades sort of diffusing that out, and that light shade on the inner corner. This ended up looking so dark that when I used a pencil liner, a brown one, you could barely see the liner. So this ended up being a lot darker than I was expecting. It's probably darker than I would normally like to go. This is definitely a smoky sort of brown look. But yeah, the colors did come together quite nicely. I just would have loved a bit more coolness in the crease. But yeah, there we go. All right, conclusion time. So what do I think about this palette overall? Now, to be honest, I think there are some pros and cons to it. And I think also a problem with it was that I heard so many people say that it's like their favorite palette of 2019. It's the best Anastasia Beverly Hills palette that's ever been released. So I did see a lot of people that were excited to see that I was reviewing this, and they had really high hopes that I'd be loving it. But looking back at the looks that I've created, to be honest, there's none that really stand out as being like looks that I really loved. So I don't dislike any of the looks. Like this look today is fine. It's a little bit darker than what I wanted, and you know, the contrast between the warm and the cool, that wasn't what I was sort of going for. I didn't mind the purple and sort of sparkly look I did yesterday. When I did a pink look, like that sort of pink purple look, I did film another video after that, and a lot of people really loved the look. And so the looks aren't bad, they just aren't things that make me feel sort of pretty, if that makes sense. I don't wear this makeup and go, yes, I'm feeling myself today, I'm having a great makeup day, I'm ready to conquer the world. I look at this and I'm like, oh, too much makeup. I've applied too much makeup today. Whereas the pink one, I look, this is too girly for me. It's not really my vibe. So I noticed that even though I did like the effects that these, you know, looks created, they just weren't things that I really enjoyed. So I think that's the problem that I personally have with this palette, is that even though I think on paper, the color story, I'm like, oh yeah, there's some beautiful browns here. I really love this purple. It's a beautiful shade. I love a sparkly color. But when I do break this down a little bit more, I find that the thing that the area that I'm most intrigued by is probably that part of the palette. So I really like the dark browns. I really like the dark purple. When it comes to that side of the palette, it's not really my color jam. I can appreciate that the red is gorgeous. It's a beautiful shade, but it's not one that I really want to reach for on a daily basis. The pink I don't want to reach for. This purple I don't want to reach for. This mauve color I don't want to reach for. So these aren't really inspiring color stories for me personally. So yeah, I find that this palette for me, it's more of a going out palette. I can create very smoky looks. These are quite dark shades on my skin tone. And I do know there's going to be people that are yelling at me in the comments, and I've heard this on beauty news. And whenever I see someone say they don't really enjoy this palette, people are like, it's not made for you. You're too light. It's not made for you. Well, I understand that this was created by Aina, who's got deeper skin tones. So of course she's going to go for deeper shades. But at the same time, if I vibe with a color story, or if I want to use it, it's made for me. So I'm not going to stop people with deeper skin tones being like, you can't use that light shade. It's not made for you. You know, if you want it, it's made for you. So yeah, if you're thinking of leaving a comment like that, don't. It's just a waste of time. And also this palette does have some light shades. So if I did want to create lighter looks, they are there. Like this shade is there, that shade is there, these shades are there, so the pink's there. So it's not as if it's not designed for a variety of people. It's just that the shades that it has been picked for the lighter shades, I don't like the formulas of. So this is super, super chunky. It's one of those shades that if you put your brush in and you sort of agitate your brush, it just chunks up, and then it applies in a like chunky way on the eye. I just don't like it. This one is the same sort of thing, that sort of weird chunky thing. And you feel like you need to sort of keep repressing it so it just stays in the pan. It's just this, yeah, it's not a very smooth, nice formula that I want to reach for. These are a lot nicer, but again, you've got a bold sort of sparkle, and then you've just got a typical champagne, which is same old, same old. So for me, yeah, I either see it as being dark brown looks, colorful looks, or sort of shimmers that I don't really enjoy. So this isn't a palette that I am going to put in my daily rotation, but I do also understand why people like it. So besides a couple of formulas that I don't like, so these two chunky formulas I just don't vibe with, and this matte on me, like, okay, it works as like a crease color or sort of something you apply and you blend out. But when it comes to packing it on the lid for a matte look, it's the type of matte that builds on itself and creates a different color as it gets sort of built on. So you don't get a nice even one color effect if you pack it on. The more you pack on, the darker it gets. So it does actually look quite patchy on the eyes. So there are a few shades in here that could be a lot better in formulation. But I think the thing that's the best about this, like the absolute standout thing about this palette, is the fact that you can choose any 2 or 3 or 4 shades at random and they should work pretty well together. So even though I was looking for a cooler toned crease color, which there's none there besides purple, the good thing is that you can choose this color and that color and that color and whatever, and you know that the look will work out well, which I can't say that for all palettes on the market. I can't say that for all Anastasia Beverly Hills palettes. I find this to be a really well curated palette that if you wanted to do a look using those two, you can. If you want to do a look using those two, you can. If you want to do those two, you can. Like, the colors work well together, which is a really, really smart element of it. And I think it's my favorite part of this particular palette. But yeah, for me, this is not a color story that I am sort of wanting to reach for every day. So it doesn't pass that test for me. There are a couple of colors in here that I will reach for this palette for. Predominantly that purple, because I love that purple with a bronze color. I love that purple with a gold. So even though I find that these shades, there's no bronzes in here actually, it's just sort of dark browns if you tilt them like that. You know, I could definitely see myself reaching for this purple shade in a daily look because it is the sort of color that I would incorporate every day. I also would reach for this palette for this red because this is quite a unique red in the Anastasia Beverly Hills sort of range, and it's very, very pretty. Not one I wear super often, but it is very, very pretty. The rest I find quite dupeable. So I do find it hard to want to be like, yeah, if you've got a big Anastasia Beverly Hills collection, you need this, because you don't really. So if I did want to create just sort of your brown, sort of even deep brown looks, instead of reaching for this one, I still would want to reach for my sultry just because it's got more versatility in color stories. So you do have light shades, mid-tone shades, deeper shades, cool and warm shades. So I would use this sort of as a basis. When I do use this, I just feel like the looks just suit me a lot better and are just more flattering. But then I would probably pair this with something like the red or the purple in this palette to add a little bit of life into it. But yeah, I wouldn't necessarily reach for this on a daily basis because the pinks don't do it for me. The browns are way too dark and too warm for what I sort of want to go for. But I do also want to say that the purple is not unique in a Anastasia Beverly Hills palette. We've got a purple here. This is the Riviera palette. We've also got a pink in here. In the Alyssa Edwards palette, we have various pinks. We've got various purples. This purple is a little bit more plum, which I also really like. You've got that sort of pinky purple shade in there. So I think the only real unique element of this palette is the red. So if you've got a fairly decent Anastasia Beverly Hills collection, I would tell you to avoid this palette unless you're a diehard for the red. But if you don't have any other Anastasia Beverly Hills palettes and this color story is like speaks to your soul, you will enjoy it. You will get a lot of use out of it, but there are a few shades in here that the formula is not great. But overall, it is typical Anastasia Beverly Hills formula. And if you haven't tried Anastasia Beverly Hills, the formula generally is a soft pressed formula. So the mattes, you can pick up a lot of product, but they are quite pigmented and blendable. The metallics are generally quite easy to apply without needing a sticky base. But again, some of them have the issue of being a little bit chunky. So if you love her formula and you've tried it before and it's your jam, this is not much different to what you've seen before. But if you really don't like Anastasia Beverly Hills formula, then you'd probably want to avoid this as well. So do I love the palette? No. Do I hate the palette? No. Do I like the palette? Yeah, it's a fine palette. But I think the more I use it, the more I don't feel like I need it in my collection. The more sort of repetitive I start seeing things becoming. But I do think it's a well curated palette. Jackie's done a great job, and if you're into those color stories, you'll love it. And I definitely think it is, in the scheme of the Anastasia Beverly Hills palettes I have, it's definitely not the best palette I own, but it's probably in the top 3 or 4. So it's not a bad palette. It's just, I think it had a lot of hype behind it. But for me, it's definitely more of a bold, going out, inject some color, inject some pink, inject some purple and red, and some dark brown. And that's not really what I wear on a daily basis. So for me, yeah, it was fine to use, and I would definitely use it again, but it's not something that I'm excited to reach for tomorrow after this review's done. So yeah, I know a few people might be disappointed a little bit in my conclusion. I apologize. If you do really like this palette, then, you know, keep using it, keep loving it. I can definitely see why people do enjoy it. It's just, yeah, I look back and I'm like, man, I didn't really like any of those. Like, they didn't make me feel really great, if that makes sense. And I feel like makeup is definitely about an expression, and if you want to start going into colors and expressing yourself that way, absolutely go for it. But I also like to be able to put makeup on and be like, I actually feel really confident today, and I can't really think of any looks I created over the past week that made me feel that way. Anyway, hopefully you enjoyed that review, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Bye.